What if I told you one man almost broke Rome without even setting foot in its city walls? This isn't fiction. This is Hannibal Barca, the Carthaginian general who dared the impossible. And his weapon wasn't just an army. It was elephants, sheer audacity, and a plan so audacious it makes modern strategists shiver. But how did he pull it off? And more importantly, what nearly killed him and his men before they even reached their enemy? Hannibal was born into a world of blood and ambition. His father, Hamilcar, made him swear a childhood oath: "I will never be a friend to Rome." Imagine swearing an oath as a child that would define your entire life. Most kids swear they won't eat vegetables. Hannibal swore war, and he meant it. By the time Hannibal was in his 20s, Rome had already humiliated Carthage in the First Punic War. Rome had taken Carthaginian lands, humiliated her people, and rewritten the rules of the Mediterranean. Hannibal didn't just want revenge. He wanted to shatter Rome's foundation, to terrorize a city that believed itself untouchable. But he couldn't just march through Italy, no. That would be too predictable. He had to do something no one else dared: cross the Alps in winter with an army, including war elephants, through terrain so deadly it could crush men like insects. Stop and think about that for a second. Thousands of soldiers, hundreds of elephants, all moving through mountains where rock slides and freezing winds could wipe out entire armies. And Hannibal made it happen. But how? It started in Spain, where Hannibal consolidated power. He wasn't just a soldier, he was a tactician, a manipulator, a storyteller for his own army. He convinced allies to join him, promised rewards, and most importantly, he prepared his men for the impossible. But even the best preparation couldn't tame what was coming. Crossing the Pyrenees was brutal, tribes resisted, rivers roared, and yet Hannibal pushed forward. And here's a fact that will chill you. Many of his soldiers had never seen snow before. Imagine waking up to frost so thick it cuts your skin. Imagine leading elephants, creatures unaccustomed to ice and cold, through passes where one misstep meant death. And Hannibal did this with a combination of fear, inspiration, and sheer magnetism. His soldiers didn't just follow him, they believed in him. By the time he reached the Rhone River, the stage was set for something legendary. Rome thought him trapped. They thought the mountains were impassable. They were wrong. Hannibal didn't just cross the Alps, he conquered them. But every step came at a price. Frostbite, starvation, ambushes from mountain tribes. Every day was a fight not just against Rome, but against nature itself. And yet he pressed on. There's a psychological secret here that most people overlook. Hannibal knew that fear could be a weapon, not just fear of him, but fear of the impossible. He made the impossible believable. He created tension with every step, a suspense that would ripple down generations. And the elephants? They weren't just war machines, they were psychological terror. Imagine a towering armored beast appearing out of mist on a snowy mountain path, tusks glinting, trumpeting, crushing everything in its path. Rome had never seen anything like it, but even Hannibal was human. Men died, animals fell, supplies dwindled, and yet he kept moving. And here's the kicker: every time you think he's broken, every time you think the Alps will claim him, he emerges stronger. He adapts. He outsmarts enemies, both human and natural. He finds hidden paths, negotiates with hostile tribes, and turns disasters into advantages. That's why we still study him today. That's why centuries later, military academies teach his strategies. That's why his crossing is not just a feat of logistics, but a masterclass in psychology and leadership. And then comes the descent. Imagine leading men down treacherous slopes, where a single slip can kill hundreds, where every miscalculation could annihilate the army you've spent years building. Hannibal's genius wasn't just bravery, it was calculation. He turned obstacles into weapons. Avalanches became cover, narrow passes became choke points, and fear itself became a tool. He weaponized the impossible. And Rome? Rome never expected him to survive the mountains, let alone arrive ready to fight. Once in Italy, Hannibal didn't just fight, he dominated. Battles like Trebia, Lake Trasimene, and Cannae are studied today not just because they were victories, but because of how he manipulated every sense, every expectation, every perception of the enemy. Cannae alone is a masterpiece of strategy, a trap so perfect it is taught as the pinnacle of tactical genius. But none of it would have mattered without the crossing. Without that insane, audacious march through the Alps, Hannibal would have been just another general, but because of it, he became legendary. And yet here's the twist. Despite all this brilliance, Hannibal never conquered Rome itself. The city survived, but his legend did not. And maybe that's the most powerful part of the story, that sometimes, even when you do everything right, fate still has its hand. But Hannibal's crossing of the Alps, that is eternal. That is a story of ambition, fear, courage, and the relentless human spirit. Let's pause for a moment. Imagine yourself on those icy slopes. Your fingers numb, your stomach empty, your elephant slipping and sliding beside you. Every noise could be an enemy, every shadow a death trap. And yet, you press forward because your leader believes, because you believe in something greater than survival. That is what Hannibal demanded and got. That is why history remembers him. But there are details most people never hear. Hannibal didn't just move armies, he moved alliances, intelligence networks, and morale. He used spies, negotiated secretly with tribes, and even faked retreats to manipulate enemies. Every detail of his march was calculated to instill terror before a sword was even drawn. That is why psychological warfare today owes a debt to a man who lived over 2,000 years ago. Think about the elephants again. These creatures weren't trained for snow, they weren't trained for mountains. Hannibal had to improvise, building platforms, breaking ice, finding fodder in barren winter landscapes. And he did it without modern tools, without trucks, without helicopters. Just human ingenuity, courage, and stubbornness. And when the elephants fell, he buried them, learned from the mistakes, and pressed on. And it's not just the logistics that fascinate, it's the human drama. Soldiers starving, animals dying, harsh terrain, and yet loyalty never broke. Why? Because Hannibal understood something profound. People will endure unimaginable suffering if they feel part of a story bigger than themselves. And he made every man in his army a character in a narrative of revenge, glory, and destiny. That is leadership that transcends time. Crossing the Alps was more than a military maneuver, it was a statement. Hannibal didn't just want to fight Rome, he wanted to rewrite history. He wanted every Roman to know that even their mighty city could be threatened. And he succeeded, not through conquest alone, but through audacity, psychology, and a refusal to bow to the impossible. Now, consider the aftermath. Hannibal's arrival in Italy sent shockwaves through the Roman Senate. Panic spread, alliances shifted, and Rome had to scramble to defend itself. And yet Hannibal's campaign was not endless. Supplies, reinforcements, and politics constrained him. But that doesn't diminish the crossing, it amplifies it. Because no one had ever done it before, and no one had done it after. It was the apex of audacious strategy. Let's reflect on one final lesson. Hannibal teaches us that boundaries, whether physical, mental, or societal, exist to be challenged. He teaches us that preparation, cunning, courage, and the human will can overcome even the most brutal odds. And that sometimes the greatest victories are not about what you conquer, but what you survive. So next time you hear someone talk about audacity, think about Hannibal. Think about frozen mountains, the roar of elephants, the cries of men battling not just Rome but nature itself. And realize the impossible is just a story waiting to be rewritten. Hannibal crossed the Alps. He didn't just march, he made history tremble. And that is why we still whisper his name over 2,000 years later, because Hannibal's story isn't just ancient history. It's a masterclass in ambition, strategy, and the relentless human spirit. And it's one story that no one can ever forget.